Hello, and welcome to this installment of our Industry Leadership Series. I'm Brian Dobson, Head of SPAC and Disruptive Technology Equity Research at Chardan Capital Markets, and I will start this call with my favorite topic, some important disclosures. So during this call, we will not be discussing Chardan research. Any discussions about research should be coordinated between a participant and their respective salesperson. Our compliance team has asked me to read this statement for the investor call. By participating in this call, our speakers attest that they have made Chardan aware of any potential conflicts, and they will not discuss material, public or confidential information that they are aware of that may breach their legal, regulatory, or fiduciary responsibility to any parties. So with that, today I'm very excited that we're joined by Gregory Poilasne, Chairman and CEO of Nuvve, and David Robson, the CFO. So gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. I guess we should hop right into to the questioning, and let's start with the big picture. What megatrends do you believe are driving global demand, and how do they shape your outlook for the next 2 years? And how have you positioned Nuvve to prosper in that environment?
Right, good morning, thank you. I think this is the trend that we've been following, initially in Europe when we started commercialization of our technology. There in Denmark was mostly focused on light-duty vehicles, always very focused on fleets though. But now what we've seen accelerating in the US especially has been the medium and heavy duty, and it's very driven by electrification of school buses at this point. But we start to see also other applications that are coming in place. Either it's refuse trucks, shuttles, and we think that for at least for the next few quarters, we're gonna remain very, very focused on that specific segment. Now, on the other hand, we have started also to talk about how we see addressing the consumer market. Right, we think that now consumers are going to get more and more electric vehicles, and the integration of those EVs into their homes initially is going to be very important. We first announced a partnership with Wallbox to deploy a solution in Spain where the EVs will be able to access some energy market, as well as providing time of use optimization for the house. We've recently announced a partnership with Swell, which is specialized in rolling out solar and storage for homes. And now we are bringing the EV piece on that, and very excited about this opportunity of working with Swell, as they've been very focused on the grid service in the same way we have been, but looking at storage and solar, whereas we've been very focused on EV and storage. So very exciting, and very exciting way to enter the consumer market at the same time. So I would say, to summarize, medium heavy duty remains our main path, but we are not neglecting the consumer market, and we think that within a few quarters we will see also some acceleration there.
Excellent. And we've received a lot of positive feedback on your V2G technology offering through our industry channel checks. I suppose, in your own words, what makes Nuvve's offering better than competitors?
I think in V2G in general, right, what that means, the first thing for us, it's about reducing the total cost of ownership of electric vehicles by being able to increase the utilization of those vehicles, meaning to use them while they are parked. In the case of school buses, it might be 97% of the time. Consumer vehicles are also parked very, very often. So the ability of increasing their utilization and to access a variety of energy markets with those vehicles while they are parked allows to drastically reduce the total cost of ownership. We observe numbers in the order of 25 to 40%. And that's really why we've created this joint venture with Stonepeak called Levo Mobility, which has the ability to provide vehicles and on the transportation of vehicle as a service in a very competitive way compared to internal combustion engine, and yet provide attractive returns to the owner of the assets, in this case Levo Mobility, our joint venture with Stonepeak. So I think that's those are important ways for us to differentiate ourselves. Now, I think if you look at a longer term, right, in beginning of December, I was in New York and looking down on the streets, and you see all those cars driving around, and you're like, in 10 years from now, maybe 50% of them are going to be electric. Where are they going to be recharging? Are they going to go in and out of Manhattan to recharge? You're going to create traffic jam across the bridges and the tunnels. That doesn't make sense. Are you going to double a network to just recharge those vehicles? That would be far too expensive to do that. And now you look around, you see big buildings that have a lot of capacity, but also a lot of flexibility in how they are using energy. And so the idea of integrating the EV infrastructure that's going to be required, to power all those EVs with the existing infrastructure, reinforcing that infrastructure where it's required, but really making the best use of what already exists today. And this is what V2G is about ultimately. It's about integrating electric vehicle in the electric system in the most cost-effective way. And I think our focus on that differentiate ourselves. I mean, obviously the big differentiator is that we've been doing it for a long time. The technology was invented at the University of Delaware. William Tempton, the professor there, started to work on this in 1996, participating into the PGM market in 2009. And so all this experience and all the experience that we've developed around the world since that is put into the platform and help us differentiate ourselves very drastically.
Yeah, and Brian, just to add to that real quick, what's unique to us is, we don't manufacture charging stations. We don't make vehicles. We're a technology company. We have a platform to accelerate electrification and provide savings through vehicle to grid. And so the way, I see it is we actually make the charger more valuable. We make the OEM vehicle more valuable because we deliver savings to the customer. And no one's doing that like we are.
That's a very good point. And I suppose just expanding upon that, do you think that you guys could just describe the competitive landscape in general and what really the near-term obstacles are for Nuvve to overcome?
Ideally, right, we would like to be in an environment where we can access as many markets as possible on the energy and power capacity side. We see a lot of momentum, pushing for that, but this is not true everywhere yet, right? So there's still a lot of groundwork to do in order to open certain markets. So today we are very focused on certain states where we see great opportunities, but the goal is really to open that across the US. And again, there's still quite a bit of work to get there. So I think that's one of the big focus that we have, and that our partnership team is working with all the utilities we know that want to work with us, and a lot of them are willing to work with us. And we've talked about some of those deployments and how we are, in some cases, demonstrating the services we can do for them. In some cases, actually providing them with true services. We think that the understanding, it's great to see that everybody understand how EV integration matters, and the awareness of how V2G is the solution to do that is building up, and it's very, very exciting. Now, I think, we still remain at the forefront, as you said, in terms of providing those services. We are far ahead of everybody else. And that's again, what we are leveraging that through V2G fleets, doing that, for example, in the parking lot of a school district, like we've announced with Levo and Troy in Illinois, but also through the hubs, like the hubs we announced, for example, with Bluebird on the output production parking lot, and how those vehicles are going to be able to provide grid services as well as optimizing the cost of energy for the manufacturing site.
Hey, Brian, one thing just to add to that, I wouldn't call it necessarily an obstacle, but it's just part of the real world we live in, which is the timing of electrification. I think all of us here know this is going to happen. There's going to be more electric vehicles tomorrow than today. In North America, it's roughly 3%. So how long does it take to get to 6 to 9? And there's some short-term supply chain issues that we're all witnessing. So I think for us at Nuvve, this is a long-term play. We have a technology platform that's going to expand, but we also have to, work with the OEMs to have vehicles on the road, and this won't happen overnight. This is an evolution that's going to happen over the next 10 to 20 years. It's going to change the landscape.
And I guess to that point, do you think that we're reaching a turning point for this type of technology? We'll see more considerable rate of adoption, acceptance, and growth, call it, over the next 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, I'm definitely convinced of that. And again, it's relating to the ability of integration of those EVs in the electric system, right? I think if you're a larger OEM today, GM, Ford, your worry, number one, is how do I go from my internal combustion engine business to an electric vehicle business, selling millions of them, but providing a user experience that similar to what people are living when they just go into the gas station and filling up their car. It will be different, but something that is as easy as that, right? And the way to do that is really to deploy an infrastructure that is integrated and not just charging stations that are on their own, that I think will become stranded asset in the midterm. Whereas if you have an infrastructure that is integrated, let's say connected to buildings where there is flexibility, now the cost of recharging those EVs is a lot more affordable. And ultimately, right, we pay kilowatt hours, but the distribution grid is designed for peaks for kilowatts. And so if the peaks get bigger and bigger, the cost of energy is going to get higher and higher, which is unfair. V2G can help get the peak as close as possible to the average, and therefore really optimize the infrastructure that exists today or that needs to be upgraded, but upgraded at the right size. And it makes the cost of energy more equitable.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And for our audience that may be a little bit less familiar with your story, do you think you could give an overview of how you plan to grow, megawatts under management, and how that's tied to an asset-light recurring revenue stream?
Yes, I'll talk about the growth, and then I'll let David talk about how this tied up with the revenue stream. The first step, which is what we started, a year ago or so, a year and a half ago, is deploying 1, 2, 3 buses here and there, which is great demonstration, but obviously you're not going to scale like that. The second step, which is where we're in now, is like deployment of like 10, 15, or like the Troy deployment, which is going to be 65. But really, the scale in terms of megawatts under management comes from what we call the V2G hubs, right? And this, for example, the Bluebird parking lot, where Bluebird has been a long-term partner of ours, and we're going to be deploying charging stations in their parking lot. Basically, when a bus is built, it can wait between a few weeks to a few months in this parking lot. So it's going to come out, be plugged to a charging station, and we'll have the ability to provide grid services as well as optimizing the cost of energy. It's a different hub than the initial, the hub that is a more practical one, where you have initially a mix of fleets. Could be school buses, could be last mile delivery, and maybe combine also with some recharging capabilities for EVs that are on the road. And we have quite a few of those in the discussion. We've talked about one with a company called Ecolution in Minneapolis next to the train station. But the way I've been describing it is now hubs next to a port, to an airport, to a train station, and on islands. Just makes tons of sense in the way we can first provide capabilities to recharge the vehicles, but also to keep the grid balanced in these areas. And it gives us the opportunity to scale fairly fast. Right? The Bluebird parking lot, that's a 25 megawatt parking opportunity right now. So it's a significant number compared to what we have in the management today. But I'll let David say more about how this combines into our revenue.
Yeah, to add on to what Gregory said, the Bluebird parking lot, or quite frankly, any customer we work with, we enter into a long-term agreement. So the Bluebird parking lot's 20 years. Our agreements with our customers generally match the life of the vehicle. So for a school bus, it's a 10 to 12-year agreement. And with that, we enter into an agreement where we will earn grid service revenues and then share a large portion with the customer. So we'll keep 30 to 40%, and 60 to 70% will go to the end customer. So a big savings for the customer. But to your question, Brian, that creates this 10 to 12-year recurring revenue stream for us. In the hub example, it's 20 years. And what happens is when a customer converts part of their fleet, we have a 10 to 12-year agreement, they're earning significant savings. When they start to convert the next piece, or they're going to come to Nuvve and say, let's scale the platform larger, because it's a big benefit for us. So one, it's long-term, but then the repeat sign-up rate for the customer is high under that type of arrangement.
Yeah, no, you guys bring up an important point with that school bus lot. I guess let's look at the school bus market from a broader perspective, because you're devoting a lot of your energy toward it. It's the largest fleet in the United States. You've got excellent relationships with BYD, Bluebird, Lion Electric. I guess for our audience, again, that might not be as close to your story, why are you so focused on school buses, and what do you think the long-term opportunity is there?
Electrification of school buses is great. It's great for the kids, right? I mean, many studies have said that the worst place in an internal combustion engine school bus is actually inside the bus, and so in terms of pollution, so that's solving a very important problem. Now, school buses are parked most of the time. We all drive by a school bus parking lot where we see all those school bus parked, and in reality, they are parked 95 to 97% of the time. They are parked during the summer for 3 months in a row during the summer. Usually, some of them go a little bit on the road, but most of them are parked. A lot of the grid issue, for example, in the Northeast, right? We have something called connected device, and that's a market where you get paid between $200 to $300 per kilowatt year to do 50 discharge, per summer. So it's a fairly short period of time, high value, and it's a great time for the school bus. It's when they are parked for the summer. The other piece on the school bus is actually the ability of discharging the school bus while they are parked 3 months in a row during the summer. Means that we keep the battery healthy, because for a battery to do nothing for a long period of time is actually not good. You get deposition on the anode and the cathode, and that impacts the battery life. So there are many aspects of the school buses, the clean transportation for the kids, the amount of time they are parked, and the ability of potentially improving the battery life because they are parked so often, that are driving us in doing that. It's a big market, 600,000 school bus across North America. Average life is about 12 years on these fleets. So there's a lot of momentum, and the government, right? The federal government has understood that, and is also putting a lot of money in doing that. Now, the school bus is really an exciting entry point, but we see that across other applications, as I said, refuse trucks, shuttles, last mile delivery. All those on the commercial side are also coming together, and we will be able to talk about some of those things in the very near future on the commercial fleets as well.
Yeah, and Brian, just to give you another sense of the size of the market, roughly 30 to 50,000 school buses are replaced every year. Today, a small portion are electric, but all the OEMs have a vision to make a much larger share. If you think about the capital we raise with respect to Levo Mobility, which is a $750 million fund, upwards to $1 billion to help accelerate electrification in the school bus market, that represents probably roughly 3,000 buses. So if you think about 30 to 50,000 replaced every year, $1 billion will get you, 3,500 buses or so. It is a gigantic market for us, and so we're just getting started on it, and we see where the future is going to go. And as you mentioned, we're partnered with the largest manufacturers integrated with their buses that sell buses in the U.S.
And one last point, sorry, is that now if you translate it in terms of Nuvve's business, right? If you think those buses are connected on 60 kilowatt charging stations, and you make $100 per kilowatt here, I mean, you're talking about billions of dollars just for that market. And so there's a big reason for us to focus on it today. Is beautiful market on its own. Now, again, this is an entry point, and we see our platform is not limited to that, and even vehicles that are parked less often, we can provide significant value to them.
That's great. I'm glad that you brought up Levo Mobility. Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing there, and also what kinds of relationships you have with these bus manufacturers, and how you expect that to grow in terms of electrification acceptance within the market?
Yeah, it's a really Levo's goal is to provide this full solution to the end customers, right? Basically, hand-holding, fleet managers through the process of going from internal combustion engine to electric vehicles. And Levo is doing that by providing this full turnkey solution that includes the vehicle, the charging station, the grid upgrades, all that put together in a single maintenance pack, in a single financing package that also include the maintenance of the vehicles, and in some cases the energy for that. And Nuvve's contribution there is really about how those vehicles have the ability to provide great services and basically making the offer very competitive today, rather than just waiting for the cost of those vehicles to go down. And so there are three areas where Levo is building muscle, right? One is purchasing power, purchasing vehicles from the manufacturers. Two is providing making sure that the vehicles are running all the time, the maintenance of those vehicles. And three, it's the customer experience, is how do they live through that? And it's positioned Nuvve as this core platform to manage the energy, be the energy broker for the vehicles in terms of recharging them as well as accessing energy markets. And then Levo becomes the arm that is providing the customer service, basically.
Oh, great. That's excellent. So I guess moving on to the residential market, that is heading on an increasingly positive trajectory, particularly with rising oil prices. Your technology has made its way into high-end residential charging equipment, such as the Wallbox Quasar. I guess, what are the challenges and opportunities in that market? And do you see a future for similar types of licensing agreements?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, right? I mean, I think when I looking at the market, I look at three big categories, right? You've got the large C&I with the fleets, right? This is the hub, for example, we're talking about. I would say you have the medium to small C&I. This would be stores where you have some charging station connected to them. Then you have the multi-unit dwellings, where you start to look on the consumer side, but living in an apartment building, and then single homeowners. And so starting from the single homeowners makes a lot of sense, because now you can provide the solar storage, EV combined. We definitely think that this combination is important, because it's providing multiple services. But one of the key aspects at the consumer level that's different from maybe the fleet vehicle is really the vehicle to home, right? The ability of keep on powering your house even when the grid goes down. There are still significant regulatory barriers to get that. And I know a lot of people are talking about it. I can tell you there are still significant barriers, because when you do that, you need to make sure that the house is basically disconnected from the grid, right? You can't just power your house if the grid is down. Because if somebody's trying to fix the cable that's broken a few blocks away from you, they would not like it. And so this vehicle to home is a very important feature. We have a lot of work underway to clear the regulatory barriers in doing that. We've done it with V2G. We know what to do in order to clear up the hurdles in the vehicle to home. And we are very actively working on that on the regulatory side in order to clear the path. I always said also that, Nuvve doesn't have to be a consumer company, right? We're focused on the grid services, but we're very happy to work with partners that want to be very focused on that. And that's why the Swell partnership makes a lot of sense. This is their core competency. They know how to get on board consumers, and adding the EV piece to what they are doing matters. We see opportunities in that space as well. And so for us to bring somebody who has all those skill sets that are complementary to what we do is very helpful in order to move forward. Sorry about that.
No, that's quite all right. I guess expanding on that, we were recently out at CES looking at the next generation electric vehicles. The battery packs are significantly improved. Do you think that also could lead to your average consumer becoming more interested in V2G technology? Because with the smaller, call it first, second generation EVs, the battery was so small that you couldn't really power your house, to what you were saying. But now it's becoming a viable alternative to having a generator, or potentially for eco-minded consumers, a way to help with grid flexibility. I mean, how do you view that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I want to expand that vision a little bit, right? We live in Southern California. People there often have an RV in their part. When you look at single homeowners, they might have an RV in their driveway. They might have a boat in their driveway, and those things are becoming electric as well. and you're gonna have big batteries on vehicles that are gonna be parked pretty often, most of the time, right? And so it's you have and then you don't have just one car in front of your house. You have multiple cars, so you can see different features, right? Functionalities that could be very attractive in the ability of managing the energy. Use it to reduce the total cost of your energy at the house. Is it about maybe one car needs to be parked all night long, but the battery is full, the other needs to be very soon? Can you transfer the energy from one to the other? I mean, you can see all those opportunities of creating services for the end users that are going to make their life a lot easier. And as you are saying, having big batteries makes that on a daily basis, you use pretty much very little of that battery. But that you need that big battery for the road trips that you are doing. But on a daily basis, you have plenty of energy that could be used to do some type of optimization at your house or providing some type of grid service in California, right? The 6 to 9 p.m. window is this gigantic ramp up. It's like 14 gigawatts. And that's hard to manage for the TSO and for the RUs and all the utilities across California. The ability of having fast responding assets such as V2G is cost effective and also fast to deploy, right? I mean, if you want to build a gas plant, it takes a lot of time to get it done. Deploying V2G is a lot faster as long as your base of EVs is big, and we know it's scaling very fast right now. So I think it becomes more and more as you get into the consumer space. The features and functionalities you are providing have to be resonating with the customers you are targeting.
No, that's right. And I think that's a very important point, that the speed of standing up this type of synthetic power plant via V2G technology is not to be overlooked. I suppose before we get into Q&A, and I'd like to remind our listeners that you can submit a question. We've already received a few. Just like to ask you a final question on your IP. How do you believe that that's erected a good barrier to entry around your business, or a good moat around your business? Because it seems like companies that we speak to within charging know that you're the company to go to license this technology if need be. Yeah,
I mean, so first of all, let me say that yeah, we have a strong position on the IP, but our goal is really to help this to grow as fast as possible. And so, but we have a lot of experience. And we want to help anybody who really want to get V2G done and work together. Now, this IP was developed at the University of Delaware, the core IP, the initial one. And this was the work that Willett Kempton started to do in 1996 when there was no previous wave of EVs. And he built all the parts, right? The charging station, he was working mostly on an onboard bidirectional charger, which we think is still the best solution at the consumer level, and quite a few OEM are doing that. And then, and basically the ability of making EVs bidirectional, so taking AC from the grid, putting in DC in the car, and then taking the DC and pushing it back AC to the grid. And then the data that needs to be communicated between the vehicle and the charging station and the platform that's in the cloud, right? So all that is the infrastructure piece. As I described it, at that point, you can push a button and you can discharge your vehicle, which is great from a functionality perspective, but not from a value perspective, right? So then the idea of having a cloud platform that has the ability to manage those vehicles, to consider the needs for the driver first, right? The primary purpose of the vehicle is for somebody to drive it at some point. And so we need to make sure the vehicle is ready, but also to deliver on the commitments we are making to the grid. And three, to protect the battery, because that's not ours, right? And so this IP really looks at all those different layers, the physical aspect of charging, discharging, the data, and the three different angles that have to be included there. And that's really what makes this IP so strong, is that it really considered a lot of things. It was the fruit of many, many, many years of work. It was built around a platform that had been participating then into the market in PGM. And so all that makes it a very strong IP.
Thank you for that. So with that, I'm going to turn to audience Q&A. Our first question is about the potential for more charging hubs. Would you speak about opportunities for additional hubs similar to the Bloomberg parking lot? And are you in conversations with other bus manufacturers to do similar types of lots?
I mean, I cannot talk about things we have not disclosed yet.
Sure.
But one thing I'm going to repeat myself though is hubs close to a port, close to an airport, close to a train station, on an island. They just make a lot of sense in order to support the EV deployment, and expect to hear from us on some of those points in the near future.
Great. Our next question is about Swell. Would you give us some more color on Swell and how that can impact your megawatts under management over the next 2 years?
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple aspects on this partnership, right? One is Swell as some contracts with, to provide certain level of capacity in states like California and Hawaii, and so we are working with them on providing that. And then basically connected some of our vehicles with in order to provide that capacity. But that we based on our own deployment. Now, where it makes a difference on the megawatts under management is the ability of combining on homes where they are working on projects they are working on right now to add the EV piece on that, and that's where it brings more potential for scaling megawatt under management in the consumer space. And if I connect to that very fast is, we haven't talked about one thing is this partnership with 2021.ai, which is really focused on the forecasting of those EVs. And that's a very important piece because as you get into the consumer space, the use of those vehicles is a lot more random. And so to bring AI in order to forecast the use of those vehicles allows us to bring a lot more accuracy in the megawatt under management and how we are optimizing the use of those megawatt under management.
Great. And our final audience question is about Levo. So you offer your technology and Stone Peak Capital. Are there competitors who offer a similar type of arrangement, or is this unique to you? And that's the thrust of it.
I think what's unique to us is that we own 51% of Levo. Obviously there are some coupon rate and certain thresholds that have been disclosed in the past, but and at the Nuvve level, though, we don't have a limit in terms of our ability to work with other partners that want to do it themselves. The reason why Levo matters is because it's a way to demonstrate how things can get done and to set the parameters around such partnership. But Nuvve as a company is here to provide the services to as many partners as possible. And anybody want to deploy a fleet of vehicles, we are very happy to engage with them and to support them in the financing, how they would be financing those vehicles. They need to provide that, but we'll be able to provide our platform and to enhance the return that they would be able to get otherwise with those assets that they would be deploying.
Great. Well, there are no further questions from the audience. I'd like to thank you both for being so generous with your time. I think that it was well spent here, and look forward to furthering this conversation in the future.
Great. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you, Brian.